Okay, so in this video, I'll try to answer the question, can you have protection against COVID-19 even if you've not been infected with COVID-19 before? Now, in order to answer that question, I'm going to try to answer another question first. And the question is, why is it that some people infected with COVID-19 have a serious illness and end up in the ICU and even might die, but some people with COVID-19 are almost asymptomatic, have no symptoms, or have very mild symptoms? Now, to answer that question, let me begin by saying that there are some underlying risk factors which make somebody at risk for getting a serious illness or dying. And these risk factors include age, if somebody is over 60, if somebody is obese, if someone has chronic illness like cardiovascular disease, cancer, or a kidney disease. Okay, so all these underlying factors make someone at risk of getting a serious illness and even dying. Okay, I'm really not talking about those people. I'm not really talking about underlying factors. Okay, so if we rule out these underlying factors, there are still some people who are asymptomatic or have mild symptoms, and there are some people who have serious illness. Why is it that we have such a big, huge disparity? In order to answer that question, let me start with Immunology 101. Okay. Now, the immune system can be divided into innate system and adaptive system. So we have the innate, which is a non-specific system, and then we have the adaptive, which is a more specific system. Now, the innate or the non-specific system can be, some of the examples for that would be just your barriers like skin, mucous membrane, and also we have some white blood cells like the macrophages, neutrophils, and basophils. Now, the innate system, it acts as the first line of defense. So something enters your body like a virus, any kind of pathogen enters the body, the first line of defense is the innate system, which tries to kill the pathogen, attack the pathogen. Okay. Now there is another kind of immune system, and that's called the adaptive immune system. So I wanted to say one more thing. The innate system is non-specific, so it's a very general system. No matter what enters the body, the innate system tries to attack that. So it's kind of non-specific. It's more general. But the adaptive system is more specific to a pathogen. So it recognizes a pathogen. So it says, oh, that's measles, that's chickenpox. So it's able to kind of remember, it's able to identify a pathogen and then try to attack the pathogen. So that's why the adaptive system is more useful in a way, because it can recognize the specific pathogen and try to attack the specific pathogen. So it's very specific. Now, the adaptive system can be divided into two types of cells. One is called the B cells. Now, the B cells gets its name because it's produced in the bone marrow. Okay, since it's produced in the bone marrow, it's called the B cell. Now, whereas the bone marrow, just a quick review, the bone marrow is just a spongy tissue inside some of your bones. Okay, so that's what the bone marrow is. So the B cells are produced in the bone marrow. Now here I have a picture of the bone marrow. Now the bone marrow has something, it has a Y-shaped protein called as the membrane-bound antibodies. Okay, so the Y-shaped structure you see is the membrane-bound antibodies, and the membrane-bound antibodies are specific to a pathogen, and they can actually lock onto the surface of an incoming cell. So if it recognizes a pathogen A, it's going to go, it recognizes that pathogen, and it has a specific antibody that can lock on to this pathogen A. Okay, if there's a pathogen B, then it has another specific membrane-bound antibody that can lock on to this pathogen B. Again, if there's a pathogen C, there's going to be another specific membrane-bound antibody which can lock on. So it's a lock and key kind of mechanism where it can lock on to a specific pathogen. Okay, so that's about the B cells. Now there's another type of adaptive immune cell, and that's called the T cells. Now the T cells, the precursors or the ancestors of the T cells are actually produced in the bone marrow again. Okay, the spongy tissue, the bone marrow produces these ancestors of the T cells. But what happens is, unlike the B cells, the T cells, they migrate to a structure called the thymus, and they mature inside the thymus. Okay, so a quick review of where the thymus is. The thymus is actually found between the lungs, and this an interesting fact about the thymus is active only till puberty, and then it starts shrinking after puberty. Okay, now again, the T cells gets its name because it migrates after being produced in the bone marrow. It migrates to the thymus. So the T is because of the thymus, because it matures in the thymus. Now the T cells can once again be divided into CD4 and CD8 cells. Now the CD4 cells, it's just a helper cell. Okay, so it's just a helper cell. What it does, it releases cytokines and it primes other immune cells to respond to a pathogen. So it's really helping other immune cells to respond to a pathogen. So that's why it's kind of a helper cell. The second type of cell is the CD8 cell. Now the CD8 cell, it directly attacks and kills the infected cells. Okay. Now the adaptive system, it defeats the invader. Once it defeats the invader, what happens is it leaves behind something called the memory T and memory B cells. That's what is unique about this adaptive immune system. So once the adaptive immune system has defeated or killed the invader which entered the body, it's left behind with the memory T cells and B cells. Okay. Now, why is this important? This is important because what happens is next time the same pathogen enters the body, these memory T cells and B cells recognize the pathogen and quickly can kill the virus or the pathogen. Okay, so that's the importance of these memory T cells and B cells, which can remember. That's why they're called as memory B cells and T cells, because they can remember the pathogen. They can remember the invader. They say, I've seen you before, I know you, and I can kill you. So it kind of recognizes the pathogen and starts attacking the pathogen. So that's the beauty about this memory T cells and B cells. So coming back to COVID-19, there was an accidental discovery. Okay, so recently there was an accidental discovery. There was a publication in the journal Cell, and this was by Grifoni et al. Now, what they found was they found memory. Now, I just mentioned the memory T cells and the B cells. Now, what they found in the study was they accidentally found memory T cells which were reactive to the SARS-CoV-2. Now, the SARS-CoV-2 is another name for COVID-19. Now, they found these memory T cells which were reactive to SARS-CoV-2, and it was found in 50% of donor blood samples. Now, this baffled them. Why did it baffle them? It baffled them because these blood samples were collected between 2015 and 2018. And guess what? Between 2015 and 2018, there was no COVID-19. Okay, so this virus was not there between 2015 and 2018, but still these blood samples had these memory T cells, okay? These memory T cells which were reactive to COVID-19, which was reactive to SARS-CoV-2. That is fascinating. That baffled the scientists. They were like, what? How is it that these people who never been infected with COVID-19 have these memory T cells which are reactive to SARS-CoV-2? Now, the same kind of finding was also found in Netherlands, in Germany, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. So 5 different studies in 5 different countries found the same thing, that there were some people, not everybody, but there was a small percentage of people who actually had memory T cells reactive to COVID-19, reactive to SARS-CoV-2. Why is this happening? What is the answer? So to answer that question, let's think about, now how did this happen? So to answer that, coronaviruses are actually of 7 types. The first 4 types just cause common cold in millions of people every year. Now the 5th type is the SARS-CoV, which is simply called the SARS, which is the severe acute respiratory syndrome. Okay, so just called the SARS. The 6th type is MERS, which is the Middle East respiratory syndrome. And the 7th type, which is the COVID-19, which is also called the SARS-CoV-2. Now, what's happening here is, now some people might have been infected with one of these coronaviruses, mostly the one which causes common cold. So what happens is, once they're infected with one of these coronaviruses, and once the adaptive immune system defeats this virus, it's left behind with the memory T cells. That is what happened. So these people who had these memory T cells were infected with other type of coronaviruses. So being infected with other coronavirus might actually provide you with the immunity to fight COVID-19. That is so interesting if you think about it. So you might have just had a common cold, and that common cold might have been caused by one of the coronaviruses, and that infection might help you fight against SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. So that is what is happening. Now, some people also believe that in Asia, the death rate is low, the mortality rate is lower than the United States and Europe. And the reason could be that because many of them were infected with SARS, the SARS virus, the SARS-CoV virus. And even in the Middle East, the death rate might be low because some of them were infected with the MERS, the Middle East respiratory syndrome. Okay, so somebody might have had just a common cold, which happened to be a coronavirus, a type of coronavirus, and they might have the immunity to fight COVID-19. So this is sometimes called cross immunity. Okay, so that's called cross immunity. And the next question to ask is this good or bad? It's mostly good. Experts believe that it is a good thing because it provides you with that protection against COVID-19, because the T cells can remember and it can provide you protection against COVID-19 so that somebody doesn't end up in the ICU. Now, sometimes it could also be problematic. Okay, so there's something called as the cytokine storm. What happens is cytokines, they signal the immune system to do its job. Okay, so they kind of prime the immune system to do its job. So sometimes what happens is having another type of coronavirus can lead to the cytokine storm, where the immune system might start attacking the healthy tissues, and that can lead to serious complications. Okay, so that could be a bad thing, but mostly it provides protection. Experts believe that having another type of coronavirus might actually provide you protection than doing any harm. So that's the good news. Okay. So that's all I wanted to talk about today, and I have um, some sources. Okay, if you want to know more about cross immunity, and if you want to know more about the T cells and B cells and the immune system in general, these are some great sources. Okay, thank you for listening.